Good evening, everyone. Sorry, we've got a technical problem here tonight. We will be webcast, but the microphones are not working. So if you wish to speak, or when you wish to speak, you'll have to raise your hand, and then Bex can put you on manually. So sorry about this. We're in a bit of a funny place at the moment. Before we start, and I suppose before we start, I should welcome so many people here tonight. We've got Helen and Ashley here from Customer Service, who are new to the organisation, I think, and Katie too, our new neighbourhood warden. Lovely to have you with us. And Brendan, I think it's your first meeting as Director of Place with us tonight, so do welcome to you, and all the other officers here we have tonight, as well as Chair of Environment. And a special mention to Sarah Scott, who's come to us tonight. You're always very welcome to at Stroud District, Sarah, and we'll be hearing from you in a minute. We've got apologies from Dinah, the leader, and Steve Lydon, who wasn't able to get to hospital. We'll have a report from Steve Robinson, so he's not with us tonight. Now, for those of you who've been here for the last hour, well, you'll know that we had a terrific presentation from our Youth Council, and I'm really pleased that Steve and Gemma came along with, led by their chair, Helen, and Mickey, and several others over there. It was a really interesting session, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure the rest of you did as well. We ought to do that more often. And I just want to show this to the webcast, because I think they're very proud of this. This is a national award they've won. Isn't it great? So should we give them a bit of a clap? Last time I had this in my hand, it broke, so I'm being very cautious with it, so I'll put it on carefully. I don't know where it's going to go. Where's it going to live?
Steve, where would you like it? Cabinet downstairs? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. Get it on split.
Lovely. So that's over. So now I'll open the meeting formally, and just tell you about the fire alarms. We go out there and there because we're not expecting a fire alarm tonight, and even though we are in a bit of an antiquated system, the webcasting will happen tonight. So just be aware of that, members of the public or whoever you are at the back. So thanks for that. So I've given 2 apologies. Any more apologies? No? Declarations of interest? No. Shall we move to the minutes from last time then, please? Is everybody happy with them? Yeah, so Steve's moving them. Second, thank you very much. So shall we vote on them then? All in favour? You weren't here? Sorry? You weren't here, okay. Anybody against? Or abstaining? So I can sign these off then, can I? I don't think we've got any public questions, have we? No? So I think we're going to have to get Sarah to raise her hand now to say she wants to speak. It really is a pleasure, isn't it? Oh, there you are.
I'm on? Okay. Right, thank you. Thank you for inviting me back again. So my name's Sarah Scott. I do recognise quite a few of you from last time, and obviously colleagues from the County Council as well. So I'm Director of Public Health for Gloucestershire. And as I've said before, I'm required every year to produce an annual report on the state of the health of our population. And since becoming Director of Public Health about 4.5 years ago, I've decided to focus these on themes rather than present lots of data to you. Try to sort of present a small, hopefully attractive report that's visually appealing and you'd like to read. And we've previously produced them on topics such as children and young people, mental health. And this year we were particularly interested in trying to make a stronger link between the concept of health and wealth. So if you have good economic growth, you're likely to have better levels of health and well-being. And this was particularly timely because we were in the middle of preparing our local industrial strategy. We wrote this last summer, so we wanted to see if we could influence the local industrial strategy, because Duncan Selby, Chief Executive of Public Health England, says that actually the National Industrial Strategy is probably the most significant national document for improving the health of the population, because where you get good levels of growth, you inevitably get improved levels of health and well-being. So, oops, there we go. So I've got a short presentation. I'm assuming you've had time to look at the report. I'm happy to take any questions afterwards. So the first slide really talks about the cycle of health and wealth. And Sir Michael Marmot 10 years ago wrote a key document we refer to a lot around tackling inequalities. And he noted a particular importance of the link between socio-economic disadvantage, so unemployment, low pay, and poor health outcomes. And he put together this health and wealth cycle, and the idea being that if one of the 5 elements is missing, then you're not going to realise the potential of having sort of good worker health, productivity at work, business competitiveness, social well-being, and economic prosperity. And quite simply, if one aspect's missing, then it's not going to work. And those of you that have heard me speak before would have heard me talk about inequalities. It's central to my role in terms of trying to lead across the system in our county to tackle these deep-rooted differences in the health and well-being outcomes of our population. And I've got this is Gloucestershire data, but the life expectancy gap is one of the traditional ways we use to measure health inequalities. So in Gloucestershire, depending on where you live, if you're a man, if you live in the least deprived part of Gloucestershire, you're likely to live over 8 years longer than if you live in the most deprived. The inequalities are much greater in Gloucester, but in Stroud, it's about 6.7 years for men, depending on where you live, in the least to most deprived part of Stroud district, and 4.5 years for women. So they're not the worst inequalities we see in our county, but it's still a significant difference, isn't it, just depending on where you live. So, and we're lucky in Gloucestershire because we have a relatively healthy population. We're a relatively wealthy county when you compare us to other places in the county. But there is a disparity, and I think what we were trying to suggest with the report was that there is a different angle in which to look at inequalities and looking at economic prosperity. So, for all health and social care partners, we spend a lot of time talking about tackling inequalities. It's one of our priorities. But for colleagues working in economic development or in private business, productivity is the priority. And the report tries to argue that by working together, we can tackle both at the same time. And it also introduces the concept of inclusive growth. And we were particularly pleased that working with the LEP, we were able to put some reference to inclusive growth into the local industrial strategy that was drafted last year. And the concept of inclusive growth really is about a growth for the economy that is fairly distributed and creates opportunities for all. And so inherently it's going to tackle those inequalities. And it's quite different to our traditional model of growth, which tends to widen inequalities. So another significant way to deliver on economic growth is to drive social mobility, ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to create the best lives for themselves, regardless of their family or socio-economic background. So we know that the better off are 80% more likely to end up in a professional job than those from a working class background. So we included some data in the report, and we looked at 3 key indicators. One of them was around early years and school readiness, education attainment at post-16 options, and rewarding employment opportunities. And I think one of the most interesting statistics is in the green box. And I get asked a lot of questions about this. So 3 of the 6 Gloucestershire districts came in the bottom 20% of the National Social Mobility Index rankings. But Stroud is absolutely bucking the trend and has come out near the top. And we're doing quite a detailed piece of work to look at social mobility for Leadership Gloucestershire, because I think it's a really important element of how we might work to achieving the Vision 2050 objectives for the county. But I get asked a lot about, well, what's so different about Stroud? So I don't know if you have any ideas. But it's an amazing statistic and clearly bucking the county trend. So it suggests very strongly that actually living in Stroud, your socio-economic or family background is not a barrier for you achieving economic prosperity across your lifetime. So, well, I'm a data geek, so I find this really fascinating. It might not be as interesting for the rest of you, but I think there's something we're definitely going to look into further, because it's such a difference. So just touching on school readiness for a little bit, in my previous reports I've included some information on school readiness because I think it's one of the most tangible indicators where we can have an impact on our children. School readiness is it's measured by an assessment done at the end of reception, so children are around 4, nearly 5 years old when this is done. And it's an assessment about how they're able to read, how well they grasp their phonics. It's a standard assessment that all children undertake in England. But the evidence suggests that actually if you haven't reached what they say a good level of development by the end of your reception year, you're unlikely to catch up throughout the course of your education. So once you're behind at 4 or 5, you're unlikely to catch up. A lot of that can be down to early years provision, a whole range of different social factors. But it just seems to be, it's quite stark that actually that impact on you when you're such a small child then will impact on your education for the rest of your life. And we've also, if you look at the data across the county, as a county we're about average nationally, and that's fine. But when you start to look at the data with the children in receipt of free school meals as a proxy indicator for living in deprived circumstances, and those children that don't, the kids that get the free school meal provision, entitled free school meal provision, have a much lower level of attainment. So there's a huge inequality there as well. So the report looks at this in some detail. And again, the gap at age 16 as well in terms of GCSE attainment, and it argues that actually by us focusing on social mobility, then it can be another way for us to close that gap, and for all of us to have, well, certainly these children to have better economic prospects. Oh, there we go. The other thing we talk about in the report is about what else is needed for successful inclusive economic growth, and that's about alignment of local planning policy and making sure that essential transport, digital infrastructure, employment, land, for example, is in place to support a thriving economy. And we looked at quite a lot of the research around this, and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation identified 3 key factors that have an influence. So when we are developing infrastructure projects, driving as much social value from those as possible, so local employment opportunities, apprenticeships, that sort of thing. Delivering affordable housing, particularly for those in lower paid jobs, and investing in public transport. And already we're doing a lot to influence this in Gloucestershire, and I know that members of my team have worked with officers in Stroud District Council, particularly the planners, to around healthy planning policy and help to support your work recently. One of the final chapters is around good work. We touch on the importance of healthy workplaces, and we know that healthier, active staff have higher levels of, lower levels, of sickness and are more productive. But it also looks at the concept of good work. So it's more than just having a healthy workplace, it's more than just getting rid of the vending machine or the smoking shelter, but actually providing work that's safe and fair and accessible and fulfilling and accommodating. And this chimes very well with the work that we've been doing with our healthy lifestyle service around the, well, I can't get my words, the workforce wellbeing charter. And again, that's not only about the traditional workforce wellbeing aspects, but also about a more inclusive workforce, so really realising the potential of retaining younger people in work, but also what the older workforce have to offer, and how you can have some cross-learning across the two. The final chapter is around the role of healthcare and public sector, and talks about the concept of anchor institutions. Now, as the public sector in Gloucestershire, we are probably an employer of nearly a quarter of the county's workforce. We're a significant landowner, and we're the sector with considerable spending power. So we've been doing some work, particularly with the NHS, the Integrated Care System, as it's now known as, in terms of their role as NHS institutions. Anchor institutions are organisations that are rooted in a place that are not going to leave, whether it be a council or a university or a hospitals trust. And so they provide huge economic benefits for the locality. But also in terms of not only through the membership of staff, but also training future workforce, our procurement spend, our social value, and in terms of our ability to innovate and attract more investment to the area. So we were really trying to emphasise to key anchor institutions that they have a role in delivering health and wealth as well. So we made a few recommendations at the end of the report, and I'm pleased to say we've actually achieved some of these already. We published this report in September. So we wanted the board to set out its position on economic growth. We're just about to publish a new health and wellbeing strategy, and economic prosperity is not one of the key objectives, but it's certainly something the board is very interested in. And we invited the G1 LEP to take up a place on the health and wellbeing board. We also sought to influence the development of the local industrial strategy, and I understand that's now been submitted to central government for their consideration, but we wanted to see, we worked very hard with the LEP to try and find some middle ground around the health and wealth aspect of the LIS. We also took a presentation to the Employment and Skills Board because we thought that social mobility, we were trying to spread the message about that and promote inclusive growth, and that went down very well. I walked away with it with quite a lot more actions. I've been invited back, so that's really positive. The fourth recommendation is around social mobility indicators, and as I said, we're already doing this work to understand what impact could this have, and we're working with partners to maintain the focus on school readiness and how we can improve those outcomes for small children. The fifth one refers to working with local planning authorities, and Stroud has been the pilot for that, and it's been a really, really positive piece of work. We've had some support from the Town and Country Planning Association, who facilitated a couple of sessions for us, so I hope colleagues have found that helpful. Number 6 is about how businesses and public sector can consider the concept of good work, how it could be measured and encouraged. This is still a work in progress, but we're continuing to support that through our Healthy Workplaces programme. And the last one is around local anchor institutions, and we're going to do some work around this through our Health and Wellbeing Board in the summer, of which Stroud has been asked to join. So we're hoping that we'll have the full range of statutory sector partners engaged in that when we do start the work in the summer. So that's a whistle-stop tour through my report. I'm aware you've got a full agenda, but I'm really happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I'd like to ask about this startling figure for Stroud on the Social Mobility Index, and ask if you have any, you've obviously thought about this, why this might be the case, and I know there may be no definitive answers, but I wonder what your thoughts on why this might be the case are.
I'm really sorry, I don't know, and that's why we're doing the work. I find it quite fascinating. There was one hypothesis put forward that was it to do with your grammar schools, and perhaps you, in terms of, because in our grammar schools in Gloucestershire we tend to ship a lot of children in from quite far away. Were you just recruiting the grammar school children from, excuse me, from Stroud district? I don't know. Would that have an impact? That was one hypothesis put forward. I'm not necessarily that convinced by that. I don't know. That's why we're doing this more in-depth piece of work, because whatever's happening in Stroud, clearly we'd like to learn from, because we could share that across the rest of Gloucestershire.
My thoughts on that were that there are grammar schools in Cheltenham, and you know the pupils in the grammar schools in Stroud are not necessarily from Stroud, and also when you pointed to the main indicator being what happens in preschool and early years, and given that Denmark recognises that and puts all huge resources into that level of education, and that in fact it's the most kind of the highest status jobs in Denmark are working with young children. Given all of that, maybe it's got something. Maybe it might have more to do with that. That's just a thought. They're certainly startling. This is certainly a startling statistic.
We triple-checked it as well, because it's quite strange. It's certainly right. So as I said, we're doing some more work on this, because I think it is particularly interesting, and social mobility is just a different lens for me to look at inequalities, but it's one that really resonates with colleagues working on economic development work, so it is certainly of interest, and it really resonates with the work around the ambitions we have around Vision 2050 about being a magnet county, retaining our young people in the county with meaningful jobs, well-paid jobs as well. So.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that, and we do appreciate you're doing. But what I wondered was, to what extent do you have direct control over resources like how much is invested in public transport, how much is made available for affordable social housing and so on, or are you kind of a pressure group trying to encourage people who have the resources to use them?
So I'm a statutory position, so I'm appointed to the County Council, so I'm a director of the County Council, so I'm not a pressure group. I'm jointly appointed by the County Council and the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. So part of my role is to be an independent advocate on behalf of the population, which is slightly tricky when you're employed by a political organisation, but the 152 directors of public health walk a line, and I think we're 7 years into local authorities now. I think we've worked out where that line is. So the Director of Public Health report is our opportunity to almost hold a mirror up to our system. A lot of my work is done through influence. So I have a budget of around £35 million in the County Council to commission services. I don't have any direct control over transport. I don't have any direct control over how you devise spatial planning policy. But I've got a team of people who are quite skilled at influencing and sharing good practice. And that's what we did with the spatial planning work we're doing with your planning team, in terms of, well, everyone knows about the link between good spatial planning and health and wellbeing outcomes, but how can we make that tangible, and how can we work with colleagues to make that happen? So I'm not a pressure group, absolutely not, but I seek to do these things by influence, and this is supposed to be helpful, it's supposed to be thought-provoking, and it's supposed to make us wonder, well, actually, what if, and just to try and spark a different conversation. And none of the issues we ever raise in the DPH annual report have a simple solution. Most of these problems, which always come back to inequalities, have deep-rooted societal problems. They're issues that we need probably a complicated solution to. So part of my job is to keep on airing these and make sure we talk about them in the hope that we do get some solutions.
A different question. To what extent are you involved, if at all, in the county's response to coronavirus, and is there anything that you can tell us about what the county is doing?
So yes, that would be me and my team. We also work very excuse me. We work very closely with Public Health England. So I think we're very much just scoping out what would happen. If I look back to what happened with Ebola, our national response was led by Public Health England. If we then get a case, like there are 4 suspected cases in Scotland, I understand at the moment, there are clear guidelines that have been pinging into my inbox all day around what happens. So in terms of how you diagnose, how you isolate, how you treat the potential cases. So my job would be around understanding that, ensuring that we had sufficient services in place. I do a lot of work around emergency planning. It's one of my statutory duties. I was chairing a meeting about it this morning, about emergency planning in Gloucestershire, working with health service colleagues. The message I will put out is that there's no need to worry at the moment. We've got very good health services. There were still, there's 4 suspected cases. It could well be that they're not actually confirmed cases. If they are, then we'll have to work through how we best support those individuals. But I suppose in the answer to your question, the responsibility lies with me.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I didn't realise I was on. I was just going to ask, because we're so well off in Stroud, as you say, but is there any year-on-year figures to pick up a trend, or is it that sort of undetectable that everyone's lost in terms of the how well off we are?
Well, I think it's expectancy. I think our life expectancy figures have been fairly static, but in Gloucestershire we enjoy good levels of life expectancy, and certainly in Stroud. When we looked at the last lot of data, it's probably one of the least deprived areas of the county. It came out very well in the last set of data. We do see a slight shift year on year, but it's quite difficult to detect. You don't tend to get sort of significant shifts. Oh gosh, decades. In terms of life expectancy, we've got reams of data. On the last page of the report, I think there's a link to a website called Inform Gloucestershire. And on there, there's a wealth of data. So there are district profiles, and there are different tiles. If you look at the district profiles, there's one for Stroud. I think it was produced middle of last year, and that will have a whole range of. It's not just the data; it's a description of what it tells you as well. Life expectancy, demographic data, who lives in your county, and also in quite a negative way, what people die of, what affects their health and well-being as well. But there's some of the standard indicators we use to measure health. It's quite a deficit-based approach, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, we're obviously at the start of a climate emergency. Obviously, we declared a climate emergency here in 2018. What work have you done? Any sort of impact assessment of climate change in terms of physical and mental health? Here in Stroud, we've got one of the oldest populations in the county. We have the oldest, or we will have the oldest population. Obviously, we're getting hot summers, wet winters. Respiratory illness is increasing, food poisoning from the hot weather in catering establishments, and just as importantly, the mental health side. Eco-anxiety is now one of the fastest growing, largest forms of mental health problems, especially in children and young people. Working with young people, I've had a lot of kids are petrified. So yeah, what sort of impact assessment are we doing regarding climate change?
So we haven't done anything specifically. There's been quite a lot written nationally about the impact of climate change, and you've very quickly articulated most of the key issues there. In terms of as the planet heats up and we get wetter, warmer weather, we'll see different diseases. Our housing isn't set up for changes in weather. We'll see more significant weather events with the impact that they bring with them, both physical and mentally. I think that, so we haven't done a specific impact assessment on climate change from a health perspective, but I know there has been a lot written on it, and we have looked at that. We're starting to do some work around climate change in the County Council. So we too have declared a climate emergency. In December, we took a climate change strategy to Cabinet. And in our medium-term financial strategy, there is a proposed allocation for £1 million to tackle climate change in our budget that's going to Cabinet next week, I think, or the week after, next week, and to full council in February. In terms of then what we're doing, I think a lot of the issues you've raised, certainly around the mental health aspects of things, I think we would tend to have more generic services, certainly for young people, and we've been fortunate to have £5 million of the funding from NHS England to have a 3-year pilot called the Trailblazer project, and this puts mental health practitioners into schools. I think there were 72 schools across the county taking part, and the practitioners were specially trained at Exeter University. So this isn't all schools, clearly, it's 72, but it's a huge amount of investment in children and young people's mental health, and it's testing out a new approach. We're one of 5 pilots in the country.
Thank you. Just a comment and perhaps a question on recommendation number 5, public health and local planning authorities. I find it disappointing, shall we say, that on major developments like we've got at Hunts Grove and Great Albury at the moment, that medical centres, schools, dentists and the like don't come on stream until quite a high percentage of the houses that are being built are either built or occupied, and with possibility of at least 2 more large developments coming in the next version of the local plan. Is there anything that can be done to speed up the provision of doctors, surgeries, medical centres, so that the strain on the existing facilities doesn't happen?
So it's my understanding that allocation of GP practices is based on per head of population. So the clinical commissioning group have a long-term plan in terms of where they site new practices. I think a lot of it is down to where the population are going to live. So I think it's unfortunate if you're in a medium-sized development that doesn't quite meet that threshold, you might have to go elsewhere for your GP provision. But the clinical commissioning group is required to provide enough general practice provision for the whole of the population. Sometimes, though, depending on where the developments are, it might not be in that development. That I suppose is the issue. I haven't read all of your planning policy guidance notes, I have to admit, so I don't know what your requirements are as a council, as a planning authority, in terms of where you want things cited. And I know you have to work with the NHS in terms of their planning policy and allocation of resources. But there's not a huge amount that I can do about that, even in terms of trying to influence it. The NHS have rules around number of head per population in terms of GP access. But I would also say it's probably worth engaging with them really early. So if you are, in terms of development, they have a team working on primary care, on allocation of GP practices and resource. So if they know what's happening, I think it's much easier for them to engage at a really early stage.
Simon, do you want to say anything?
I was just going to say. And you guys actually, in terms of what health requirements are required in big developments. That's my understanding of it. Obviously we could go over and above the national guidance, but I understand that we're guided by county.
It might be the planning team, but the CCG do have a framework where they decide where to put primary care facilities. So I think it wouldn't be the county council telling the CCG where to put their GP practice. I don't think we have the power to do that. Because we don't have the money would come through the NHS to fund the new capital builds.
Thank you, Sarah. You mentioned a lot about early years, and bearing in mind that over the last 5 years we've had quite a few cuts in children's centres, etc. How much work do you actually do, and how much influence have you? Because you say that Stroud, well, you know, with mobility anyway, but you said that some other areas, particularly those areas that we probably know, are way down and below average. How much influence do you have regarding it early years, and how important it is with funding, or do you not?
Wow, you know me, Steve. I always like to try and influence, trying to have a say. And I think so. The public health grant supports the existing 16 children's centres, so we do put money into them, recognising if we're going to tackle inequalities, the 16 that we have left are really important in terms of working with some of our more vulnerable families. We also fund all the school nursing and health visiting provision, which I think is really important. Again, it's one of our few universal services we have left in public health. And so with health visitors, every family gets 5 points of contact at least with a trained health visitor. In terms of influence, I work really closely with the Director of Children's Services, Chris Spencer. We share an office, all the directors sit together. I'm working very closely with his team around the development of a strategy for children and young people in the county. One of the main priorities coming from that, we think, will be around school readiness. So in terms of influencing that wasn't a particularly difficult thing to influence because it was very much on their agenda. There are lots of factors that affect early years, parenting, level of income, availability of good quality early years services, a whole range of factors. So I think we're trying to understand, well, where could we actually have an impact, because some things we can't influence, but some things we can, and that's part of the work certainly my team are doing with the Children's Services team at the moment.
So that, you know, it's all about educating the parents. Yeah, you know, that when the children come home from school, you know, that they don't put the telly on, or they put the telly on for half an hour, and then they work with the children with something or other, and that's where that's where the table shows, as you said before. So how much do you actually work with or do the Children's Centre work with the parents? Do you give funds towards that? Or?
An important role to play. so not blaming any parents in terms of the school readiness scores. And I think that the work the children's centres do in terms of they offer parenting courses, they do a lot of support, and they do guided play with some of their families, almost teaching some families some parents how to interact with their children, how to play with them. So there's a whole range of different services on offer, but that's not universally available across the county. That's just in 16 places. So we offer quite a lot of funding. We help commission the children's centres. The funding comes from public health, and there's a whole range of different activities there to support parents. I think they do vary across the 16 depending on what the parents, the staff or the parents need.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm really I think the social mobility stuff is totally fascinating, and I'm really with my colleagues here about the early years are so vital. I mean, it's 50 odd years since I first started as a nursery nurse and opened playgroups, because you know, nurseries were closing down then. We thought things would get better, not worse. And you know, it's a recognised fact that children are sponges at that age, and it really is awful to think that once you're behind at 4, you know, which is your greatest learning capacity at that age, that you always will be. And I hear what you're saying about the more vulnerable families, but one of the ethoses of the children's centres was to educate the parents too, not just educate the parents about their children, because there's huge distractions these days. It's so easy to shove a child, you know, give a child a phone or a tablet and let them entertain themselves. You know, and a child that learns to read with a parent will always have a love of reading. But I think it's really unfortunate, you know, and I think it will come home to roost that we're not educating our young children, and things will go downhill. I can't emphasise that enough. So any pressure you can bring would be greeted very well from this quarter. And we're doing our bit in Stroud with our health and wellbeing team. I mean, I think it's starting next week, isn't it? This new mums thing that they're doing in 3 centres, because that's again, it's not just about exercise or anything like that, but it's getting, you know, social isolation is quite a killer, and you know, we lots of us know and have had experience of postnatal depression in young women. So you know, we are doing our bit, and perhaps that's, you know, that helps towards this social mobility thing that we you know, we do have a very good team, very small team, I have to say, here at Stroud. It is really fascinating what you're doing, and you know, whatever we can do to help, really.
The social mobility work will be shared with Leadership Gloucestershire, so Cathy O'Leary and Dorian will have access to that. And so if you ever wanted us to come back and talk to you about that and what we've learned and what we plan, if we can get to the bottom of why you're so good and what we can then share, then I'd be really happy to do that if that's helpful. But I think it's going to Leadership Gloucestershire. If not March, it will be June, I think.
So for the next civic year, that would be good, wouldn't it? Would you agree? Thank you. Has anybody else got anything to say to Sarah, except to say thank you very, very much for coming along? You know, it's delightful. Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. So, we let you go and welcome Rachel, who's going to come and talk about the street trading policy. Now, we had this before, it went out to consultation, and now it's completely changed, which is a good thing. It shows you that consultation really does work. And Max will switch me off and switch you on any minute.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I'll just give you a little bit of information about my report and where we are with our street trading policy. So I'll just start with a little bit of background and how we've got to where we are. So way back early last year, we were advised by our legal team that since 2000, there were certain parts of our current policy that had been adopted at that time, and obviously over time legal opinion does change, and the view now is that there was two parts of our policy that actually were not legitimate under the legislation, and that was the waivers for markets and exemptions for community and charitable events. So in our policy that we've obviously had for a very, very long time, we actually waived the need for markets such as Stroud Farmers Market, Dursley, Minchinhampton, Nailsworth Market. We just did a simple waive saying that you don't need street trading consent. Just one point to point out is that Stroud Farmers Market, although they didn't need street trading consent, they do have a licence agreement to use the Cornhill, because Cornhill Market is actually owned by Stroud District Council. But that is completely separate to street trading. Don't get those licences muddled up. And what our policy currently also says in regard to community events and charitable events, so that's things like village fetes and goodwill evenings and all those sorts of good things that go on in our district. In our current policy, it merely said we exempt all those types of events, they don't need street trading. So obviously we've got to take account of legal advice, and so we looked at a way to move forward, and we drafted up a revised policy. So we came up with some replacements effectively, and we looked to replace the market waiver with a market street trading consent. And then we looked to have for the community and charitable events, and we wanted to replace that exemption with a light touch community and charitable event consent. Obviously both of those would involve making an application, and there would be potentially a fee involved because there's work involved for us. We also did a few other updates in that policy as well for some revisions and to bring it up to date. And in your document pack there, you've got Appendix D, which is the draft policy, and the original bits in red are still in there of the original changes. So we put that out for consultation back last summer, and we did get quite a few comments back, and those are listed in Appendix A of your report. So you will see there are a couple of them that are quite detailed, and people did have some strong views. In particular, Dursley, Minchinhampton and Nailsworth did express some deep concern that the changes would actually have a significant impact on local events and town markets, and they would potentially could make those events not viable. So we listened to what they had to say, and we sought to find a solution to that would go some way to address those concerns. So we decided to go back a little bit further. So rather than just trying to revise our policy, we've actually now looking at our resolution. And what a resolution is, it's in the street trading legislation, and it's an adopted designation that the council adopts, and it will state what part of the district we want street trading consent rules to apply to. Now, the current resolution that we have literally just covers the whole district, and we're not unusual in that. Lots of districts have applied their street trading resolution in that way. But we've come up with a proposal, so we're going to have a new resolution is what we're proposing. And we start off, our starting point is still to designate all land and street within the district, but we're going to exclude any land owned and managed by public authorities or owned and managed by registered charities, other than, obviously, public highways. And we have a new resolution which was drafted by our legal team, and that is Appendix C in the pack. So what that means on the ground is that trading on any land owned and managed by Gloucestershire County Council, Stroud District Council or town and parish councils, bearing in mind there is an exception for any highways, managed streets and pavements and lay-bys, but those land run by councils will not need street trading consent. And similarly, any trading on streets or land owned or managed by a registered charity, so examples could be charitable trusts, will not need street trading consent, because with in the resolution they will not be areas that are designated. So in the original consultation there was concern about things like village fetes and local markets, but hopefully with this new resolution the majority of those will actually fall out of our designated area for needing street trading consent. So for example, Minchin, Hampton and Dursley Market, they're both in like marketplaces that are run by a market trust which are registered charities. Nailsworth Market, I believe, is on land that is actually owned by Nailsworth Town Council. So they will not need to have a market consent. So basically for them it will be as usual. There will be no changes. There will be some events like Goodwill evenings held in the street, or if any markets potentially are going to be set up in the actual street on the highway, they might still need street trading. But certainly the charitable and community events will be able to take advantage of the light touch process that we're planning to introduce within the policy, and we have built in a provision to waive the fee if certain criteria are met. So we've done all that. We've put that back out for consultation. That was at the end of 2019, and mainly the comments were favourable to that. They are shown in Appendix B, and you'll see that there's not too many there. There was somebody made a comment, I can't remember who it was, one of the councils, about we were proposing to allow the fee for community events to be waived just once a year, and they said, well, that's still quite restrictive, so we have removed that. And if you look in the policy, you will see that we've crossed that particular criteria out. In the policy document, the further changes that we made are shown in blue, just for ease. So if we do agree, or if you agree tonight to change the resolution, there is a statutory process that we have to go through to make it legal. It's laid out in the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act. So if you agree tonight an intention to adopt the new resolution in the documents, what I have to do then is put a statutory notice in a newspaper and here at the council offices and notify highways. I have to have a formal 28-day period for any objections, and then we must consider any objections, and then if we're satisfied, we've got to bring it back to committee, I would suggest in March, to formally adopt the resolution and our final policy. Then after that, I then got to put another 2 notices in local newspapers before we can actually start implementing it, to tell people that's what we're doing, and what we hope is that we'll get everything in place from the 1st of May. So thank you, Chair. If anybody has any questions.
Yes, sorry. So just to be clear, charitable events on public land will be exempt. But what about a charitable event on public highway?
If it's on the public highway, it wouldn't be exempted under that reason, so potentially it will need street trading. And that would be through that, if it's an event, it would be through the light touch process. But our aim is to keep that process as simple as possible. So literally a 1-page application form, and there is a provision to waive the fee.
Just a quick one. I assume that school playing fields would be deemed as public land and therefore would be exempt.
It all depends. I would imagine school playing fields are potentially they're going to be county council, or they may be owned by a playing field trust. I believe some of them are playing field trust, which would be a charity. So in both those cases, they'll be, with the new resolution, they'd fall outside, so they won't need anything.
Charitable events on privately owned land, would they come under the waiver, such as village greens, that sort of thing, which public have right of access to, but can't be gated or entry fee charged? Would that come under the waiver?
It depends who owns the village green. They may be privately owned, but I would imagine they're going to be owned potentially by the parish council, or
Not the
it
one
might
I'm
be
thinking
county
of.
council.
Not the one I'm thinking of, but the longest village green in England.
It's, and it's not owned by a trust or anything.
No, as far as I know, it's privately owned.
Then potentially, yes, they will need to go through our street trading event provision, the light touch one.
I can inform that. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Just to double check, Rachel, that the the Noels that take place in most of our towns Christmas time, so a lot of those take place on the street, so they would just be a light touch for a Noel, even if there were 20 stalls, it'd still be a light touch.
So I'm just waiting for my light to come on. Yes, they would be a light touch, yes. I mean, the waiver is at discretion of the head of health and wellbeing, but they're a charitable event with an organiser, so they would fit those criteria.
Right, I'm on. Thanks, Rachel. So if there's no more questions for Rachel, shall we go to the advice? Because this is something we've got to resolve. Can we take that as read, or do you want me to read it out? No? Can somebody propose it then? Thank you. And second it. And do we want to debate it? We had a good long chat about it last time, I think. Didn't we? I think Rachel's done a really good job on pulling all together all the stuff that's come back. Can we take that as read? Shall we go straight to the vote then? All in favour, please. Thank you. That looks unanimous to me. Thank you very much, and thanks for all you've done, Rachel. But you've got the next one as well, haven't you? We've got double value with Rachel tonight. She's going to do things about taxis now. Over to Rachel, over and out or something.
Thank you. Right, this one I think will be a little bit shorter. So this is the report about the National Register of Taxi Licence Revocations and Refusals, which is a bit of a mouthful. So what this is, it's a register, and it's been set up through the Local Government Association, the LGA, and it's hosted on the website, and it can be accessed by local authorities that have signed up to it to use the register. And what the LGA hope is that all local authorities will sign up to it, because unless they do, it won't really work that well. So once we're signed up to using the register, if we revoke a Hackney carriage or a private hire driver licence, we will put some details on the register. And similarly, if we refuse either a new application or a renewal application, this is just in relation to driver licences, doesn't affect vehicles, again, we will record that information on the register. Now, that information will just be basic details. It will just identify the driver, the decision that we've taken, and the date. Then what local authorities can do, we can search the register when we're processing or new applications and renewal applications. So every time we get an application in, what we'll do, my team, we'll go onto the register, put in the basic details and see if there's any entries for that person. If we find a match on the register, we will then contact the authority that recorded the entry and seek for some more information. And then we can use that information when we're making our decision whether that applicant is a fit and proper person, a suitable person to be a driver taking members of the public in their vehicle. So that's quite simple. However, the bit that complicates it a little bit is that use of the register does have some quite significant data protection implications, and they're detailed in quite good detail in the report. Fortunately for me, the Local Government Association issued some very, very detailed guidance about how we should comply with data protection when we're bringing this in. So they're telling us about stuff about how we've got to notify all our existing drivers, we've got to amend all our forms so everybody knows and we're clear and open with it. And we've got to tell them how we're going to deal with their personal data. The LGA guidance states that authorities should have published policies, and they'll be on our website, on how we're going to use the register, and in particular how we're going to share, receive and use information on it, and a draft policy for Stroud District Council based on the wording recommended by the Local Government Association is Appendix A to the report. The LGA have also say we should update our taxi and private hire licensing policies to reflect use of the register, and the draft wording to be inserted into Stroud District Council's taxi and private hire policy is Appendix B, and again that's based on what the LGA suggest we should have the wording. So the report recommends, it's in the interest of public safety and in order to prevent unsuitable persons holding taxi licence and private hire licences, that this committee agrees to adopt use of the register and adopt the draft policies in the appendices A and B, with a view that we will commence using that register from the 1st of April. Thank you.
I presume it's a national register. And you did say that unless everyone signed up to it, pretty well, that the register won't be really foolproof.
Yes, it's a national register. The LGA obviously encouraging everybody to sign up. I have heard talk that if take-up is not good, they may consider actually making it mandatory that local authorities have to sign up to it. But at the moment, they're just obviously, I can't see any reason why a local authority wouldn't. It's just as a bit of a process to get through first with the data protection. So there's a little bit of a slow uptake, but I think the authorities are getting there.
I think that would be almost immediate, that they make it mandatory. We've got to learn a lesson from the police forces when they kept their own records. They didn't share it with other people. The poor girls that got murdered simply because of that, because they two neighbouring police forces didn't talk to one another. So unless it's mandatory, then it's got to happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Is there any appeal process that if somebody disagrees, I mean, somebody moves to this area from some, other part of the country, and they want to start up, and you look at their record, and something may have happened 5 years ago or whatever. Do they fall off like they might do of a conviction or whatever? Is there any sort of appeal process that they can go through?
The information will stay on the register for 25 years, which is a long time. But when we get that information, what the guidance is saying, that we then must look at it and decide its relevance and decide whether we're going to take account of it or not. So we will deal with that information the same as we would deal with any other information that we get when we're looking at an application. So you've got to remember we do all the criminal checks, we do DVLA checks, medical checks, driving assessments, and we look at all those things and then we make a judgment on whether somebody is suitable, based a lot on our policy and our guidelines in there. If we made a decision to refuse somebody's licence based on the information from the register or for any other reason, then yes, they do have right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Rachel, in the consultation and feedback box, it says that the Stroud District taxi and private hire drivers have been notified of the Council's intention. Can you give us some idea what the feedback has been from them? Are they in favour of it, or has there been some resistance? Thank you.
Yes, we do regular newsletters to the taxi and private hire trade, and we had one that just went out on our Christmas one. Nobody has made any comment to me about it, so I'm not sure that any of them have any issues with it. And I can't see really why they would, really. Thank you.
this seems eminently sensible to me, and seems to be the right way to go, especially in a place like Stroud, I think, because quite often quite vulnerable people in rural areas do use taxis, don't they? I think it's a bit different in the urban areas, isn't it? But you know, we do have people, you know, who are quite vulnerable, and with the topography we've got, we need to be very careful. I think we've always been pretty good in Stroud, haven't we, about who we recruit. So, but this is another way of looking after things. And I'm sorry, we've got an awful lot of work to do with this data protection stuff, but it is important, isn't it? So, if we're all happy about that, can we move the advice? Thank you. Do you want me to read it out, or can I take it as read? It's up there on the website, isn't it? So perhaps I don't need to read it out, because we must resolve this. So do you need any debate on this? Quite straightforward. You're getting away with it tonight. So shall we go straight to the vote then? All in favour? Thank you very much, members. It's unanimous again. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thanks for staying with us so long. Nice to see you again. Right, and we move on to the future of leisure provision in Stroud District and the proposed extension of the Stratford Park leisure contract. And Mike is going to take us through this particular report.
Chair. As many of you know, Stratford Park is a beautiful facility. It's set in 56 acres of beautiful parkland just outside of Stroud, with many types of users within the park. Everything from the leisure centre, the Stroud Museum, bowls, the new park run, Stroud College use activities in there, skateboarding, etc. So in line with our corporate delivery plan, we need to agree a long-term investment and management plan for the park and its users going forward. Therefore, as per one of the points within the decisions box, and subject to the approval of S&R and the previous recommendation of this committee, to ring-fence Culture and Leisure Reserve to use to commission a review. That review would be probably led by the new Strategic Director of Communities, who starts in March, and we'll be looking at putting together a brief and in consultation with the Chair of CSNL. And that brief wouldn't just be decided by officers, that will be brought back to this committee for approval as per my report. The review will take a considerable amount of time to cover all the aspects of the park, as well as importantly the aspects of the future of the leisure centre itself. So therefore, as part of the report is to recommend a further 3-year extension, which was built into the contract from the original start, to take the contract provision up to 2024, should it be agreed. Should this be agreed, this will also enable us, the contractor, to, from April of this year, 2020, to bring in the pay scales for his staff in line with the real living wage, which currently at the moment they don't pay, but this would fall in line with our own council's pay policy, which is what we have adopted. I'm not sure if I need to go any further with this report, unless you've got any questions. It's a long decision box. It's a long decision box. It's a long decision box, as you can see, and it's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of discussion on how we do this, and Mike's quite right. We are waiting for our new director. We're starting early next month, I think. Keith. So this is one of the things he'll hit that ground running on. I hope his background is leisure, so we're hoping we're confident actually that he will have a good grasp of where we're going to on this, and appointing consultants to do this work for us.
personally, I'd like to see it spread even further and see the provision in the Stroud district. I think that's all going to come into this review of perhaps we need to look further than just Stroud and Stroud Town, because we are Stroud District Council after all. So there it is. Have you got any questions for Mike? And I'm sure he'll do his best to answer them, or we've got other officers here as well for anything more technical. Any questions, anyone?
Just one. Yeah. I'll have to turn that around a little bit so I can see that's better. I'm just wondering to what extent this review will actually take in the whole, as Matty said, the whole of the district, and not just Stratford Park Leisure, Stratford Park, because clearly, there's not a lot of provision away from Stroud, from Stratford Park, and it would be just nice to see what the overall appraisal was. It would be nice to have that view. So to what extent will it actually take in the whole of the district, Mike?
As I said it. Do you want me to come back on that? As I said that bit. That's my wish. I think that's the next step. I think this is the first step to see about what's happening. I mean, what Mike, did you mention it's an ageing building, our leisure centre now? It's nearly 50 years old, and by the time we complete all this, it will be 50 years old. I remember when it was brand new, it looked sparkling at the time, and it's looking very old-fashioned now. And, perhaps we need to be looking at that. So the answer, I suppose, from me would be, I'm not sure, but I think that perhaps needs to be our next step.
I'll come back. Just that I'm thinking from a cost point of view, if we're actually completing the exercise in terms of the Stratford Park, because there's not much away from Stratford Park, it might be quite a cost-effective way of doing it to tie the whole thing in one go at this time. That's the point I was making.
Can I come?
Yeah.
As my report outlines, the brief is going to be put together. It's going to be in consultation with the chair of this committee. Obviously, there is a set amount that's being set aside to do this review, and quite rightly, we would probably get some advice from experts within the industry to how far that might go. But from the point of view, as the initial part is starting off in the park, but to extend it how far it goes, I think will depend on the actual size of the budget, because obviously we know how much is going through to S&R for approval from the Arts Cultural Reserve. So from that point of view, I think it's when the brief comes back, further discussion we'll probably be able to have.
As I say, my thinking is that when briefing the consultant, it may well be that the increased cost in having an overview within the report covering the whole of the district comes to very little more and could be quite useful strategically.
We're on. Right. Each time I've been there during the week at the leisure centre, during term time especially, there seems to be an awful lot of cars parked there that the college pupils bring. So my question is, does the college authorities contribute towards the upkeep of the car park?
No is a simple answer, but it is a public car park, and the parking restrictions on it allows them to park there and to use it, as does a number of people who might be going out on coach trips. They go off and get picked up from the park. The manager who runs the park is sitting at the back of the room, and I know for a fact he keeps his eye on it very, very extensively. I can ask him how many cars in that car park, and he usually tells me how many. Doesn't quite go to the registrations, but he does keep that more detail, because we do monitor it. Because at the end of the day, I think, not bringing the car park saga into tonight's committee, but there is not such a thing as a free car park. because we've still got to maintain it. So the answer to your question is no, John.
It's just that I've seen cars parked on grass and muddy wheel marks and all that sort of thing. That has to be maintained, and it costs this council to do it.
One of the things I can confirm that as part of the car park review, we did put a parking place order into that car park. So now, when people decide to park on the grass, they will get a penalty charge notice, parking charge notice.
Here we go. Very good. Yeah, but the point that John has raised is quite important, because obviously if the parking, the college parking, overtakes the spaces that are available to the centre, the whole point is it's going to affect business, and the whole point is that you start losing business simply because of the college, then I just don't see the sense of that. You need, with the greatest respect, you need to keep in front of it, as opposed to, and once people start parking on the grass, surely that's the sort of when you tap the barometer, as if to say, the spaces have gone, but who is parking on the grass? Basically, if they're parking on the grass, it's sort of shooting yourself in the foot, isn't it? Because you're not taking care of it.
In answer to your question, Brian, Rob, who is the manager of that area, will talk regularly with the college. And as I say, the PCNs are quite effective, as well as in the generation of income. But as soon as they get a PCN, it goes around like wildfire, and people don't park. You will still get users of that park who think, I'm going to park on there so I can park in the shade. But the ramifications they will get now would be a PCN. We don't go out to target them, but the point is that tool is there for us to use.
Say that is, don't let the business go, because it's always hard to get it back.
Yes.
In other words, you stay in front of it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Ken, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support the Living Wage Foundation's rates for the people at the Sports Centre. I noticed that we're asking SLM to increase their salaries. I understand this will be at our cost, at £80,000 a year, so £250,000 over the next 3 years. Where have we budgeted for this, and also would it be included in the contract where we would actually not actually pay that in the future? Thank you.
Is that easier if I take that one? It probably is. So we've got the budget going to strategy and resources next week. That includes within, as a cost pressure, an amount of up to £80,000 for that. Obviously the report sort of delegates authority to officers to agree the final terms, but it won't be any more than that. So we've planned for that within our overall 4-year MTFP, and I'm no legal expert, but that would probably be a variation on the contract for the period from 1st of April from this year, that we would expect SLM to meet the Living Wage Foundation rates, and as you quite rightly say, if that's an extra ask from us, that's a cost that's borne by us. I should say that they have been very cooperative in those discussions and have done a lot of work in sort of properly mapping that out to their wage structure.
Can we move to the advice?
Debate. Just. All right. Sorry. Okay.
Advice? Thank you, Ken. And the seconder? Yeah, okay. Debate.
Thank you. I would just really like to support Gordon when he said about looking at it, and I do understand there's a budget for it, but looking at it as a district-wide, and I'm pleased to hear what you say, Chair, and I trust that you will bring that up when the time arises. That I think it's a feeling of the committee here tonight that we do look at the district as a whole, please.
I would just like to say, as the lead amongst the Labour group on the Leisure Centre, and also the fellow member with Rob of the Stratford Park Management Committee, how much I welcome this decision for a strategic head to actually look at this, because it's a wonderful resource, the Leisure Centre, but it needs to be looked at in the round. You know, there's a museum, the Leisure Centre, biodiversity, etc. And nobody really has taken a kind of an overview and looked at all those things together. And it certainly will probably take a lengthy period of time, so therefore I would recommend the time scale on this. This is the least it's going to do. And in answer to Gordon's question about looking strategically at the district, as far as I understand it from the pre-meeting, there is nothing really excluded from what the strategic director is going to be looking at. I mean, for example, if the leisure centre itself needs completely rebuilding, there's nothing to say that it has to be rebuilt actually in Stratford Park even, as far as I understand it. And so I think there's kind of, there's a lot of blue sky thinking can go on here about the leisure centre.
Again, if I can take what Gordon and Steve Robinson have said a stage further, I do appreciate what Nigel is saying, but the reality is, if you look at the recommendation that we've got, the aspect relating to the whole district is one small sentence, and the rest of it, the bulk of it, is about Stratford Park. And it will disappear unless the consultants who are engaged are very clear that the possibility of providing recreational facilities across the district should be given a much more significant weight than the recommendation here advises. And I wondered if you could reassure us on that.
If you look at B, it is coming back to committee for approval. So my feeling is, and this is after talking to lots of people, and we've had extensive talks about this, that we've got to look at Stratford Park first of all. Stratford Park is a gem in the Stroud district. There's no two ways about that. You know, we've got a vibrant leisure centre. We've got a fantastic museum in the park. All sorts of aspects. You know, we've got some of the rarest trees in Gloucestershire there as well. So we have got a really vibrant, wonderful park here, but we've also got an opportunity. And I think coming out of the first report, will be looking at further into the Stroud district. It's not true we haven't got any other provision. I mean, we've got the fine, what Steve Lydon always refers to as the Dursley Bats, which is, you know, the pulse, and the highly successful pulse in Dursley. And, you know, we can be looking at that too. And so I think this resolution as it is really more than adequate for what we need to get the ball rolling. We need to get the ball rolling now. We don't need to be hesitating and saying we need to put more money in to go on and do other things. I think we need to start with this resolution and be very clear about what we're doing. And to give it, as it has been said here tonight, to give it adequate time to do so. And that's why the extension is going on. And who knows what will come out of that. So it will be really interesting to see what comes out of it and what our new director will make of this. So I think that's the initial brief that he will have. And I would recommend it to you wholeheartedly. Norman? You're on, Norman. Don't fiddle with
Right,
it.
great, yes. Thank you very much,
Don't
Chair,
fiddle.
and I appreciate the reply. It's very straightforward and very honest, and the answer is that this will be a Stratford Park review with perhaps a little bit of what could happen in the district tacked on to the end of it. So we need to be clear about that. Given what Gordon is concerned about, it's for Gordon to say, but that's the answer. It'll be a Stratford Park review.
So if I just reassure, obviously we don't have the Strategic Director of Communities here, so I will pretend as another Strategic Director to even begin to fill his boots. Mattie's quite right in all the things that she said there. Norman, you said it's just referenced in one bullet point. I think it's important that it is the first bullet point, because we as officers, as Mike covered, are clear that this will be a review of Stratford Park, and as it says up there, the leisure centre facilities across the district. So, as Matthew rightly says, the brief will come back to this committee for approval. Absolutely, it's not something which we as officers are going to do as our own, but we are clear that it will not just be about Stratford Park, though that is our, currently primary leisure centre, but we'll look across the district, and I'm happy to say that here. That's something which we are considering.
Thank you, Andrew. I think it's very clear. I know you say it's only one sentence, but it's the first bullet point, actually. So is everybody content with that? Any more debate? No? Shall we go to the vote then? All in do you want me to read this out, or can we take it as read? I suppose I have to ask that every time, don't I? Can we go to the vote? All in favour? Thank you very much. That looks unanimous again. Thank you very much, Mike, for that. Item number 9 is our work programme. Any comments or questions on that, please? Yeah, because we've had the youth, the young people from the Youth Council here tonight, along with Steve and Gemma, I'm going to propose that we don't ask them to come to us in March unless you feel quite strongly about it that they should, because they gave us a nice update tonight at 6 o'clock. So unless anybody feels strongly about it, I don't feel we should ask them to come back in March. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah, you're not okay.
No, yeah, I'm fine, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah,
no, I
you're
was gonna
saying yes.
Ask a question.
He's going to ask a question too. Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah. No, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. The, also we got, is it Emma doing the health and wellbeing update in March? Can we get an update on mental health champions? Because I know we've talked, because I don't know where we are currently with that, with the work. Yeah. It seems to have gone quite quiet, but there may be work that I'm unaware of that's going on. And I think she was going to give us some information about the forest, forest green project as well.
Okay.
And one other thing. I think we had this discussion about doing an information sheet about the Lido, where we are currently. Is that out today? I haven't seen it, sorry, yet. I know you were on it, Mike. Brilliant, lovely. Okay, got it. Right, thank you.
Seen this? It's 22nd. There's copies at the back.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. So that's the work programme. Lost my agenda now. There you go.
I'd be very glad to add to the work programme, if we may, although I can't give a date. It's a report from our new director on the future of our arts and cultural strategy, hopefully towards the end of this year, but whenever possible. But I don't want to fix a date, but just to keep open the possibility.
Thank you, Norman. We'll note that. We move on swiftly to member reports. As I said at the top of the meeting, Steve Leyden, because of a bereavement, wasn't able to go to Hosk. He's usually very good value, and Steve Robinson has sent round a report, if you've all got it. Have you all had it? Any questions for Steve?
By email.
Democratic Services. Shoreby, they sent it round. Yeah. I would just like. Yeah, can I just say that regarding the cancer care and a task and finish group, there was a concern at Hosk. People were finding that they had their first appointments fine, but it was the second appointment, that was supposed to be within so many weeks was not happening. So there is a great concern there, because we know how important it is for people to get back. And they're, as I pointed out there, they're still doing, I suppose people will know that currently I think it was last week, there was a citizens jury meeting all week to look at surgery at both hospitals in Cheltenham and Gloucester, because there's been talk of moving most of it to Gloucester. So there was a citizens jury, and then it's going out to consultation what the citizens jury come up with. Okay.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? Thank you for standing in for us. Sorry.
This morning I went to visit the previous leader of the Labour group, no longer a councillor, who was taken in as an emergency to Gloucester Royal after kidney failure, and he was on a trolley for 20 hours in A&E, but reflects the high standards of the nurses and the other staff in A&E, and how they're constantly bombarded with admissions and desperately looking for beds within the main hospital. I just wanted to reflect on, which you probably know already, the pressures that the nursing and other staff in A&E face, and are doing it nobly.
Thank you, Norman. Thank you.
And we've also had a report from Nigel about the museum in the park. That's been circulated. Any questions for Nigel there? We have already talked about the museum in the park for a while. The police and crime panel, well, we haven't had a meeting except the budget meeting, which Steve and I went to last week in Waterwells, which was quite interesting, but as of that time they still hadn't received the money from the Treasury, had they, Steve? But there was 23 million expected, yeah? It's expected on the 23rd of Jan, sorry. Why did I say 23 million? 126 million. Yeah.
I noticed today there was a headline that the Home Secretary has come back and said that there's a vast amount going into policing. They're putting more into policing, and they're allowing, there was an amount that they're allowing each police commissioner. It wasn't a percentage, it was an amount they were allowing. So I don't know how that relates to Gloucestershire, but I think he was saying that it would just be in line with, was it 2 or 3%? It wouldn't be 12%. Like happened last year, but it depends now. If the Home Secretary is saying that they can put it even higher, then no doubt he may well do it. But
Band D, they were allowed. Yeah.
More than what he was expecting. Yeah.
really didn't know what to expect, but they do want to increase officers on the beat. But of course, there's all new legislation coming in now with graduate training and apprentice training, and they were assuming another 150 officers, weren't they? Something like that.
Something like that, and it was going to be. There's only 2 ways in, as from the 1st of April.
Yeah,
graduate or apprentice,
yeah.
3-year apprenticeships.
Yeah, or 2
And I
years
think that's
for
why
graduates.
they're developing the training college down at Barclay for.
Yeah, one of the things that they were talking about, I don't know, should we be saying this, but they are sort of trying to recruit from other forces, notably the Met as well, aren't they? Which saves them a huge amount of money, of course. So a lot going on there. So there'll be more of a report next time. We've got a meeting, well, not next Monday, the Monday after. So we'll definitely have a report next time. G1st LEP and Citizens Advice. I don't think you've had any meetings, have you?
No meetings, but I can just say a few things about both of them. The first one is on Citizens Advice. Sorry, G1st LEP's first one on the list. As I say, no meeting as yet. The next meeting's due at the beginning of March. So with a bit of luck, we'll be in time for our 26th of March meeting. But just to say that the Barclay Vale Tourism group is about to start. This has come as a result of the £2,000 that this council gave to market towns to set up tourist information sites. So if you would like to take a note of the website, it's www.barclayvaletourism.co.uk. Yeah, I can do that. The site's not live. It's live, but it's not been made Google friendly yet because it's still being tinkered with. So you can go and have a look at it. I think you'll be impressed. It's a very impressive site. It should be live in about a month's time, and at that time they'll switch on Google, if you like, on it, and people will be able to find it more easily. Also, there's a Facebook site which is at Barclay Vale Tourism, and that's up and running as well. And the whole thing is, as I say, about to kick off. I think at the moment they've spent about £1,000, and that's paid for the site and everything, and all the work that's been done working up to that time. And there is the next big thing is signposts, because the whole site revolves around the use of QR codes. So basically everywhere there's a signpost, there'll be a QR code, and people with mobile phones will be able to have instant tourist information. So at for instance, Cameron Dursley Railway Station, there'll be a sign saying, for all your tourist information, check this QR code out, and they'll be able to find out where to go, etc. One interesting thing there is that there's a bicycle hire company in Slimbridge, based at Shepherd's Patch, and they are happy to deliver bikes to anywhere that people who want to hire them from. So, for instance, you could be coming by train from London, get on the phone to this company, and they would have bikes waiting for you at the station. And I guess they could probably do that at Stonehouse as well. But if not, then there'll be other companies, I'm sure, that bike hire companies would be more than happy to do that. But the key thing is that basically, instead of having these electronic tourist information machines that they have in city centres to tap into tourism, which are very expensive and have to be all wired in, simply having a QR code on a sign means that every mobile phone is a tourist information centre. And I think that's been a very simple realisation. They hope to have signs all over the place for the other £1,000, and therefore have set up a big tourist information operation very, very cheaply and very efficiently. So that's good news on that front. I believe that the Director of Tourism for Tourism Gloucester has resigned or left, and a major shake-up is taking place in Gloucester just now in terms of tourism. I think that initially it's coming in-house. Hopefully I'll have more information on that on this March meeting, but clearly from the whole area's point of view, the whole county's point of view, that could have quite an impact on tourism if there's a scale back there. But we don't know exactly what the plans are for that at this moment in time. So moving on, if I can, to citizens' advice. This month is double D month, evidently. Again, no meeting has taken place. The next meeting is actually next week, so for our next meeting, I'll have an update. It's because it's happened all over Christmas, and there's just happened in meetings. But this is the double D month, and the January, and don't get too excited. It stands for debt and divorce, as you can imagine. Debt and divorce are things that happen after Christmas. I think people spend more than they can afford perhaps at Christmas time. There's huge pressures to do so, and that impacts on lots of people. And of course, just having to spend time with people you don't normally spend a lot of time with can add a lot of frustration, so this is what they're dealing with in January. From our point of view as a district council, obviously they're doing a lot of work because our rents, a lot of people, if they're in a divorce or a debt situation, it impacts on that. It impacts on council tax. So they're doing a lot of work on our behalf just now, and that's great. But again, I'll have more information on that at our next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Jill's leaving because her taxi's around, so nice to have you here tonight, Jill. Thank you. Performance manager.
Well, I'm afraid I can't tell you much about this because I wasn't there at the meeting. I was enforceably detained in Gloucester Royal. But apart from that, I dare say Mike can answer any questions that are coming from this report. The one thing I will pick out is from the relevant finance issues is the ongoing problems with the CHP at the Pulse, and they're still ongoing, and hopefully they will be resolved by next month. If not, there could be legal action taken. More on that at the next meeting, hopefully. But if there's any questions, I think Mike would be better placed to answer them.
Okay. Thanks, John. Nice to have you back with us and back to full strength soon, no doubt. I've lost my agenda again. Keep losing it. Right, we're on to members' questions. And John, it's you again. You and me.
Okay. Do you want me to read it out for the sake of the camera? Yes? Yeah, okay. Question I asked, I'm asking then, a task and finish group from this committee was formed a couple of years ago to decide on tourist information centres around the district when the centre at the subscription rooms in Stroud, which was operated by the Stroud District Council, closed during the transfer of that premises to Stroud Town Council. A recommendation was made by the group and approved by this committee that the 7 market towns in the district identified by the task and finish group should be given the opportunity to receive £2,000 each from District Council to help set up their own tourist information offices, with a letter going to all of them informing them of the offer. So the question is, Which of those 7 market towns have taken up the financial offer from SDC, and where are they? Sorry, that's 2 questions. Where are they in the process of setting up their own tourist information centres?
Well, my reply is, all 7 of the market towns took up the offer of the District Council and received the grant sums offered. Following the previous requests for information, and I'm aware you've asked before, officers have contacted all of the councils asking for an update on how the money has been spent. The majority of councils have now responded with full details of their plans, and the final pieces of information are expected shortly. Officers will then distill the replies into a member information sheet which will be circulated to committee members.
Thank you. Yes, that's fine. That's what I was hoping for, actually. But the reason I asked this question was because when I was a gentleman of leisure back in November, I was reading an article somewhere. I can't exactly remember where it was, but it was to do with this area, and the writer of the article had made the point that their visitor centre had lost quite a bit of visitors, trade, put it like that. And he put the blame on the closure of the Tourist Information Centre at the subscription rooms. Hence this question to find out what was going on around the area.
Well, to my mind, it's all good news that all the towns seem to have used it. I've had sight of what they're doing. As I say, it's all being compiled, but it all seems to be very good news on what they're doing, and it's almost you know, towns have been almost match funding it and been using it to promote. I know Wootton's done a tremendous amount of work, so has Dursley, Nailsworth. Well, they all have. They're all using it to very good reason, and I think, you know, it was a very good allocation. It was a much fairer way of dealing with the Stroud district, which we felt at the time, and it's paid dividends to my mind. So, as I say, it'll all come out in the member information sheets shortly, so you can see for yourself. And I'm sorry it's taken so long to come back. It was one officer leaving and another officer not being there. Thank you, John. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. I'd be more than happy, Chair, to take a couple of photos of how Nailsworth have improved their tourist information and share them, because I think, yeah, it's great.
So I'll let Ken say something, because I'm sure you'll want to say something.
Oh. Thank you, Chair. No, I was eating the end of the orange, actually. I'm getting desperate for something to eat. Thank you for the cake earlier on, by the way, Chair. That was very grateful. Yes, Wootton has responded 3 times now to the Council with what they spent the money on. It's now in phase 3, and the clerk, actually, ahead of our discussions earlier on in the week, sent a letter to Adele explaining what we've done and what they're going to do for phase 3. And I'm pleased to note, talking to Jeff Walsh, who runs the Heritage Centre, which has the TIC in the front of it, that last year, from July to November last year, the additional tourists or people calling information was up 15%. So I think, you know, having proposed during our task and finish group, it was me that actually proposed that we should do the £2,000 to each of the town councils. I'm very pleased that they appear to have made good use of it. Thank you.
Just let Gordon know that Barclay, do you know what Barclay's doing? They're doing a very good thing with Barclay books. So yes. Go and see. No, I don't need conversation about it. Just giving you some information. All right. This is the strangest members' questions I've ever had. But as we're a nice friendly committee, it doesn't matter really, does it? Yeah, come on.
Just to come back, I think it was money that was well spent, and I'm very pleased that the towns around the district are making use of it, and probably it will be better utilised by being spread out around the district than just having one centre in Stroud. I may be wrong, but that's the way I feel.
Round the room, because I was expecting, oh no, we have got a Rodborough councillor here. We've got nobody from Stroud here today. We're all from the market towns, but yeah, I think it was a very good decision, and I hope you can go back to whoever it was that made those remarks and put them right. I'm trying to put this on. That's the end of our meeting, I think. Thank you, everybody, for staying, and thanks for coming so early. It's been a long evening for some of us, so thank you very much indeed.